I started in 2002 here at Beeson. At the same time, I was working across the street at Covenant Presbyterian Church. I had grown up in a Southern Baptist church in Auburn, Alabama, and had become Presbyterian when they had a job opening. That's the truth. I feel like I'm confessing. And it was a great fit. I worked at Covenant Presbyterian Church for 4 years and also went to seminary, which was great and a good experience because everything I learned here I saw doesn't necessarily work when you deal with 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th grade students. It was good. It kept my feet on the ground. After that, my wife and at the time one child, 2 children, we moved to St. Andrews, Scotland, where I went to work on a PhD in Hebrew Bible Old Testament with Christopher Seitz, and finished up under Dr. Mark Elliott because Seitz left. I went to Toronto, finished that in 2009, was back here in the Birmingham area for 3 years, and during those 3 years, well, let me back up. While I was at St. Andrews, actually, since we're talking about theological education today internationally, while I was at St. Andrews, this is where the Lord sort of brought to fruition in my own life, in the life of my wife, and I think even our oldest boy, that we should really seriously consider teaching in an international context. The anecdote goes as follows. I'd been presenting at a conference in Edinburgh on Jeremiah and had presented a paper on this and had spent the day. And St. Andrews is just about an hour from Edinburgh by train, and so I had gone down with several friends, and on the way back up, it was just myself and one other guy, a pastor now named Dr. Josh Moon. And Josh was sitting across the seat from me in the empty train, and we're talking this and that, and he asks, what am I planning to do with my degree? I said, well, I want to teach. Well, obviously, you want to teach, but what are you going to do? Where are you going to teach? Who do you want to teach? And I'm kind of hemming and hawing. Well, I guess I'll go to a seminary somewhere. I'll look for a liberal arts college or da-da-da. And he said, no, what color will your students be? And I never, ever thought of that question. And it stuck with me. I don't think I even had a good answer for him. I wish I did at the time. I didn't have an answer for him, but that question has remained with me and remained with me as I began to talk with mission agencies that were doing theological education abroad. While at St. Andrews, another formative thing happened. The president of the agency I'm with currently, United World Mission, was on his way back from East Europe, and he stopped through Scotland to meet with 3 of my colleagues, postgraduate students, that had either come from the mission field or were headed to the mission field, but were doing a PhD on the way. Now, I didn't know this about these guys. It speaks to their humility, but all 3 of these gentlemen said, well, yeah, one of them told me, I've been in Japan for 5 years teaching in an English school, and I'm here to do a PhD, and now I'm going to San Jose, Costa Rica to teach New Testament. Another guy, well, I'm doing a PhD so that I can go to Latin America. I don't know exactly where, but that's where I want to go. Well, all these gentlemen were targeted by the director of our agency, John Bernard. And the president of the agency stopped and held this dinner for us, and I went along just to see what all this theological education talk was about. Well, the vision he cast that evening for us and our wives was biblical in proportion. Gentlemen, do you want to fight heresy around the world? Gentlemen, do you want to be involved in the shaping of the church to come in the next half millennia? Do you want to be involved in what theology will look like at a global scale? If you do, come with me. And at the point, he had us whipped up into a frenzy. And yes, oh, Captain. So, where do I sign? It's a good thing he didn't sign us up that night. I would have signed then. And it would take another 2 years before my wife and I were ready to seriously approach the agency and say, we feel called. And I'll talk a little bit more later about some of the other motivations for considering theological education abroad. Some of them might sound pedestrian or even banal. But I believe, as I believe you believe, that God is at work and there's nothing circumstantial in this. So I am with a branch of United World Mission called Theological Education Initiative, or TEI. My first appointment was to this beautiful old building in Buenos Aires, Argentina. It is called ISADET. Now, in Latin America, as probably in a lot of other parts of the world, acronyms are very important, and they're often very long. So I'll refer to the schools I refer to by their acronym name. But ISEDET stands for Instituto Superior Evangélico de Estudios Teológicos. So it's much easier to say ISEDET. This was founded in the 1880s by Waldensians, actually in Uruguay. And then the Methodists joined on. They moved over to Buenos Aires because of the human capital in the city there and the resources. And now, the nine dominant Protestant denominations in Argentina send many of their candidates to the school, or did. If you'd like to know more about the personal, some of the personal nature as to what's going on with the seminary in particular, please see me after the talk. But suffice it to say, 2 years at the seminary, teaching Hebrew Bible, Hebrew, hermeneutics, and Introduction to Old Testament courses. Our agency and I both agreed perhaps we should look elsewhere to be fielded. But while I was there, I learned a lot about theological education. Anecdotally, this was my biggest class. And you learn a lot when you're overseas, looking and taking part in a culture that's not your own. For example, that silver thermos there in the middle of the tables, anybody know what's in that? Anyone who spent time in Argentina? This is the national drink. It's not wine. It's the second national drink. Mate. It's mate. Has anyone had mate? Yes. Did you like it? It was all right. Right. Well, then you didn't have truly Argentine mate, because Argentine mate is absolutely terrible. Now, a missionary should not say that, but it was horrible. It tastes like strained grass clippings, which is literally probably what it is. But this is a hot water bottle that almost all the students carried with them into class. And my first day at class, I'm sitting at the head of the room, getting prepared to teach, and this girl pulls out looks like a 5-pound bag of sugar, but it's tea leaves. And she starts dumping this in a gourd that had been hollowed out to make a cup with a silver straw coming out of it. It's called a mate. You drink mate from a mate. She's hollowing out a cup. I wish it was in the picture. It's not. Fills it with tea leaves, fills the hot water in it, starts passing it around the room. Meanwhile, the guy on the other side of the class is doing the same, passing it the other way. I'm trying to teach in a second language, and a guy hands me a cup. It says, "Profe, te toca a ti." Professor, it's your turn. Drink. I'm okay. No. Everybody looks at me as if I've committed some horrible faux pas, which I had. I had denied my first offered cup of mate. I came to learn that when someone passes you mate, even if you're lecturing, you drink it. Well, okay, the mate passes, and second or third class, I'm kind of used to this. Then a lady comes in late, the lady standing up next to me in the back row, she comes in late one day to class, 30 minutes late. We're in the middle of an exercise, working very difficultly working in difficult text. And she comes in and goes, "Sorry, I'm late. Excuse me, profe." And she goes around to every single person, one by one, giving them a kiss, called a beso, and telling them, "How are you? How's your mom? How's everything going? Are you okay?" Good. Well, yeah, my work's been tough. It's been a rough week. Okay, good. Yeah, we'll talk more later. Really? There's more to talk about. She goes to the next person, all the way around the room to me, asks how I am, how my son is. She knows my son's been sick. We've been praying for my son in class. And she asks how my son is. 10 minutes later, we're done with saludos, hellos, good, how are yous. I look up and half the class is gone. Where? To get more hot water for their mate. So, if you are going to consider theological education abroad, be ready for things like this. This is not perhaps the way it is in the rest of the world. Dear students, I think very highly of them and miss them. All right, next slide. What have we got? While in Buenos Aires, I was involved providentially again with the University of St. Andrews, but this time not with the one in Scotland, the one in Argentina. There is one in Argentina. It's the University of San Andres. This was a liberal arts college founded about 30 years ago. They have a Department of Humanities with no Department of Religion. Such, they have no one to teach comparative religion classes. So the director of the board happened to go to my church and live around the corner from me. And he said, "Why don't you come and teach?" Which was, come and teach. You're a missionary. You're free labor. Come to our university and teach. That was kind of a joke. And kind of not. I was free labor. So I Had no reason to say no. Great practice for my Spanish. I get there the first week and there are 25 students. 3 times what I have at the seminary I've gone to. This is great. Second week, 30. Fourth week, fifth week, from then on the room is full. 46 people come to this class. Now I made no bones about it at the beginning. I'm a Christian and I will teach accordingly. However, I want this to be a safe place. Well, these students had never experienced a class or discussions on religion like this before. And this was a great group of students. I really enjoyed being with them. And we'll not talk about that. This is some of them towards the end of it. Some of them towards the end of the group. This brings up a point that any of you, and I hope in this room, several of you are thinking about theological education abroad, need to start thinking about early on. What are you going to go do? It's very easy to go abroad and fill your time teaching here and there, or here. Teaching a la carte courses, teaching with biblical institutes. These things are well and good and they're valuable and they have their place. I, however, had been sent to work at an accredited institution with the purpose of building a master's and doctoral level research program. This was a great environment. I was happy there. I enjoyed it. I could have stayed. They were talking about possibly even looking at building a department of religion and offered me the possibility to think about directing that department. It would have been very easy to stay. We would have been very happy. But, like I said, this highlights the fact that you need to be clear on the purpose. Why were we sent? We were sent to build a generation of scholars and pastors that will be in a position to fill the lecterns of seminaries and Bible colleges around Latin America so that come the swell and the surge that missiologists and everyone predicts and that we see happening. When that happens, good theology is being taught, good hermeneutical practices are being ingrained in the pastors, good interpretive skills are being passed on. So that was why we were sent. So I had to say goodbye to this lovely group of students, and we ended up in Colombia. Right? There's the name. Seminario Bíblico de Colombia, Fundación Universitaria. We call it FUSBC. F-U-S-B-C. Right? This was founded in 44. This is a group in Medellin, Colombia, founded in 44 by the Methodists. This is, right now, the group I am working with. We're building a master's program. The master's program will be modeled very, very closely after the Hispanic master's program that Fuller Seminary is rolled out with their Estudios Center for Theological Studies for the Latino World out of Fuller. It's a fully accredited master's degree, and we'll talk about that. Well, maybe you can ask about that process of accreditation later. It's interesting, and it means different things in different contexts in the developing world. I'm involved with this seminary now. I am getting the master's program up and running. There's the ubiquitous missionary picture of them in action to prove that I was actually there. This is a conference on violence, displacement, and internally displaced people in the country of Colombia. Our seminary has been heavily involved in not only providing job training and after-school care, but for working in a multidisciplinary think tank at the national level with economists and some politicians, some theologians and some pastors, both from the Protestant and from the Catholic side of the table, at an international conference to try to address the question of violence, displacement, and its effects on society in Colombia. So I gave a paper on violence in judges, and I basically said there's a lot of it. Now, while I was giving this talk, when I stood up to give this talk, and I began to speak, everybody looked at me as if I was speaking another language. I thought, oh no, I've really been working hard on Spanish. Come on, tell me I'm doing better than this. Well, I've been studying Spanish in Argentina for 2 years. And if any of you know Spanish or you know different dialects or sounds of Spanish, it's as if someone from New Jersey went to Bessemer and started holding forth on the street corner. That's the variation in dialect, right? So I'm speaking in Argentine Spanish, and everyone's looking at me kind of funny. The gentleman who introduced me ran back up to the front very quickly, very apologetically. I'm so sorry, everybody. I forgot to tell you. He's been in Argentina. And the entire place went, oh, right, we understand. Okay. But from that point on, even now, my emails and whatnot, I'm Profe Argentina, which I take as, I'm not sure if it's a compliment or what, but that was there. And another thing, if you're going abroad, you need thick skin. So, a challenge in the developing world when it comes to theological education, it's clear. One of the challenges is resources. This is our entire theological library for the seminary and undergrad. This is our entire reference section here. This one shelf that you can see. Behind it are romance novels. I don't know why they're there, but they have them. And down that side, over there, are sort of general specific categories of texts. New Testament, Old Testament, a little bit of theology, a lot of liberation theology, and then miscellaneous stuff. This is the entire library. What you see is what you get. So you can imagine the degree to which the theological, well, maybe you can't. It's very hard to assign good work to students. It's very hard to get good work from students, particularly from those of us who have studied in the North and are used to a certain caliber of research. When this is what you're dealing with, your students are forced to go online, which opens up another ethical can of worms, because there are numerous books that shouldn't be available online that are available online. What do you ask your students to do? So as a professor or as somebody who teaches in this environment, you have to be very clear with your administration, your faculty, what you will or won't abide. And it's a source of a lot of conflict right now, not only in our faculty, but in faculties around Latin America of theology. The subject matter itself has an ethical moral component to it. And if a student, the only way the student can afford the $75 Hebrew text is to go on scribd.com and read a scanned version of it, what do? Something to think about. Right. Another challenge is what's going on sort of contextually where you go to serve. In Colombia, for example, our issue is, maybe you can't see at the bottom, it says internally displaced people, IDPs, right? Internally displaced people are people who have been forced to leave their home due to several factors: violence, forced displacement, illegal land sales, right? These kinds of things. Colombia, according to the chart published at the end of 2014 by the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, Commissioner for Refugees, the country with the highest rate of IDPs is Colombia in the world. And this number that they show, 5.4 roughly. However, experts on the ground say, remember, this only counts towards those who are displaced due to violence. 5.4. This doesn't account for those who are displaced due to illegal land sales or forced evacuation of their homes without violence. So they think the numbers are somewhere closer to 7.5 to 8 million displaced Colombians right now in the country. And the next line is worse. Of those 5.4 they know of, look how many have returned to their home. So nothing's working. Zero. None of them have returned to their home yet. Why do I mention this? Well, if you're going to do theology, if you're going to teach at a seminary, if you're going to be involved in the life of the church, you have to touch the real world. And our seminary, FUSPC, has done that, has provided programs for their students to not only get on-the-job field training, right, cross-cultural ministry practicum. These guys go around the corner and they leave a Barrio 3, which is relatively safe, and they're in a Barrio 1, which is a picture I just showed you. Barrios where the police don't even go in because it's that dangerous. The students go in there and they provide medical clinics, they provide some literacy classes, they provide job training for some of the women, they provide after-school activities for the children. The students are forced in their formation, their theological formation, they're forced to be involved in the ills and the plights facing their society that they're in. They can't remain in their classes studying. Our seminary also has caught the attention of the Ministry of Education of Colombia. In a lot of Latin American countries, your theological degree is not accredited by an independent body, as it is here in the United States. It's accredited by a branch of the government who probably knows little to nothing about theological education. So they don't care how good your program looks, how thick your syllabi are. They don't care who you've got speaking and how many PhDs are on your faculty. What they want to see is, are you doing anything good for our country? And our seminary in Fuspese, I'm happy to say, to no credit of my own, caught the attention of the Ministry of Education. They said, you're doing real good with IDPs. Because IDPs, often this takes place in the villages outside, called the campo. It takes place in the campo. They're forced out of their home by either drug violence, rebel violence, or now the predominant cause are multinationals coming in and saying, oh, that land has a lot of coal in it, or it'd be great to grow palm oil plants here, or there's probably gold here. Then they'll go to the county, or they'll go to the commissioner of the district, pay him off. The guy will generate a false land sale. They'll take the land sale, the deed of land. They'll go out with an armed escort and say, your land was sold to us. You have 48 hours to get off your land. No violence occurs. So under UN regulations, they're not considered IDPs. They're not available for government protection. They're not available to any of that. So they end up homeless, and they end up migrating to the cities like Bogota, Medellin, right? Medellin is where the seminary is, and that picture I showed you the last slide is probably less than half a mile from where the seminary is located. It's an IDP camp. They come and they kind of just band together around the city. Well, this is a drain on capital in the city. The city can't handle this kind of thing. So the government has seen the efforts of the seminary to help tangibly, right? And this has caused the government to say, you would like a master's degree? Fine, we'll accredit it. You'd like a PhD program? Great, send us the stuff, we'll accredit it. See, it's a very symbiotic relationship between the seminary and the accrediting board, which is the Ministry of Education. So, as you move and think about potential theological education abroad, I was having a conversation this morning. Perhaps the question of accreditation is a real one. Do you want to go and work in a setting, maybe perhaps a non-formal setting, where you teach in institutes here and there? There's no cohort and there's no curriculum to which the students are aspiring to graduate from. They're just bettering themselves. That's great. Or perhaps you might think along the lines of, I want to do formal theological education. I want to go be part of a faculty at a seminary or a Bible college somewhere. I want to be involved there. Their accreditation can possibly play a bigger role. Lots of factors come into play, as you can see from the question of IDPs in Colombia. Now, we're not going to do a lot of history. That would be incredibly boring as you've just eaten and are struggling to stay awake. But the reason we're going to talk about this is because it's helpful to know where missions has been before we talk about where missions can go, particularly how we can go and do theological education effectively. It's not very helpful to rush off and say we're going to go do this theological education thing without a clear sense of the context and the world in which we're going to go try to do it. So, very quickly, you're familiar with possibly, perhaps, modern missions. The first era could be summed up in something called beachhead missions, right? The idea of a beachhead is what? Invasion, setting up a base, right? Think of William Carey in India. You arrive, you're there for the long haul. You're going to die there. Coming back is a sign of failure, perhaps. You're there, you set up a beachhead. Now you can bring resources in and distribute them in. You go and look for the few believers that are possibly there, right? Another era, the second era perhaps, and these overlap a bit. Again, this is heuristic, that's it. Frontier missions. This is where the effort begins to move inland a little bit. The focus is not so much on the coastal areas or developing new first-time bases. Now the focus is on moving into the interior. Oftentimes the focus is on younger missionaries. The focus was on perhaps recruiting and using people who are less educated. However, with this came a heightened sensitivity culturally to the customs, linguistics, and sort of the ways of life of the people to whom these missionaries were sent. You can think of someone like Hudson Taylor in this context, going to China, founding hundreds of schools, and by the time Hudson Taylor and his work is done, all 18 provinces of China at the time have a missions outpost in them, not just the ones on the coast. So, another era. Third era. Third era, perhaps the unreached peoples. This is a focus on, as we were talking about earlier this morning, Dr. Parks, a focus on finding people who have not heard the gospel, delineating them by their people group or language group, finding people who have not heard the gospel or don't have access to the gospel don't have access to the scriptures. Think of William Cameron Townsend, the Wycliffe Bible Translation founder. probably heard the story. He's doing some work in Latin America, and a native Indian comes up to him, and neither of them speak the same language. They both appeal to a third trade language, and neither of them speak it very well. And the Indian says to Townsend, he says, tell me about your God. And Townsend's trying to tell him about his God, and ends up telling him, well, we have a scripture. This is where God has spoken to us. And the Indian says, well, I would like one. And so Townsend pulls out a Spanish Bible and hands it to him. And the guy looks at it, and he opens it, he can't read it. He says, well, if your God is so great, why can't he speak my language? So this leads Townsend, to move into the direction of founding Wycliffe Bible Translators. And this is, a movement towards unreached people, getting scripture in the language of people so that all can read and have access to the gospel. Helpfully, the focus in this era begins to shift from places to people. But even the mindset of maybe beachhead missions is still alive and well, because I've not met anybody who's asked me, to whom do you minister? To which people do you go and teach? Rather, they ask me, where do you teach? Where do you live? Where do you go? Right? Perhaps there's in our mindset this earlier beachhead mission mentality of going and thinking geographically instead of, with a focus on people. I'm not saying it's negative or positive. I'm simply saying that's the way it is. All right. Now, from Jenkins and other missiologists, we have, before we look at the fourth era, which is kind of where we are in missions, we have some numbers. Now, again, I don't think anyone has actually counted the Christians that are alive in the world, or were in 1900, or 5 years ago, or will be in 35 years. However, the numbers are general, and they do make a point. In 1900, these are in millions, the number of Christians, and it's obvious in Europe there were the most. In 2010, these are the numbers. Projected, by 2050, this is what the world's numbers of Christians will look like. Where are the Christians located?
South.
The south. Which way is the south? Down. Trick question, sorry. Right. Look at this growth. In Africa, 100 times growth of Christianity. In Latin America, more than 10 times the growth of Christians. In Asia, 27 plus times the growth. North America, 4 times. TBN will still be on the air in 2050. So we will probably still have some gospel presence. Europe, it actually declines, about a 30% decline, projected again. So what does this say about missions, and what does this say about theological education? Just the numbers on the graph. That's not a rhetorical question. Anybody?
We're going to need more pastors in the South.
We're going to need more pastors in the South. We have pastors in the South. We have lots of pastors. We actually have too many pastors. If we've got a lot of pastors and there's a lot of church growth, what do these pastors need?
Training.
They need real training, right? Now, there is a missiologist out of Aberdeen named Andrew Walls. He's also worked in Africa, so I encourage you to look him up, read what he's written. And he says, and I agree, by 2050, Asia, Africa, and Latin America will have to start pulling their weight theologically. He doesn't say it in a derogatory manner. He says it literally. The numbers are there. They need to pull their weight theologically. Not only pull their weight and be good enough theologically, they're going to need to be the leaders of the theological dialogue in our world. Now, I find it interesting that we have a Latin American Pope now. A lot of people in Latin America rally behind that. Our Presbyterian church attendance almost doubled when Papa Pancho, as they call him in Latin America, Papa Pancho was voted in. What explains that? A surge in spirituality, right? Maybe a lot of Protestant churches in Latin America are trying to capitalize on this renewed interest in spiritual things. For example, in Argentina, when in the late 70s, early 80s, surveys put the number of Catholics in Argentina about 97.5% of the entire population. 2010, that number was down to 75. What's filling that vacuum? What's going to fill that vacuum? A lot of people think in Argentina, particularly because that's where Francisco's from, the Catholic numbers will surge back up. On the Protestant side, the question is, well, who's going to capture this new sort of open demographic? Right? So these are going on within Christianity, but the numbers of people converting to Christianity are, I don't know, staggering to me. Over 1 billion Christians projected in Africa by 2050. That, right now, at the theological table, you go to a conference on theology, or you pick up a book and read it. Where are most of them written from, and to whom are they written? To people who can have a dialogue in the northern Atlantic scene. However, where are most of the Christians in the world? Already. That center of that balance, that power is shifting. The epicenter is no longer in the north, right? So we're going to have to account for that. All right. Now, we look, with those numbers in mind, look at the fourth era, right? It's been called a lot of different things. People call it the indigenous initiated missions. People call it the facilitator era, right? Now, this is the period in which we find ourselves. So anything we do, any of our theological education efforts need to be done cognizant of the numbers that we just saw and the projected numbers of what the church will be in the years to come. In a lot of the old models, and again, I do not mean to disparage anything, because anything we see from standing on the shoulder of those who've gone before us. Oftentimes there was a mentality that the gospel was brought to people. In this new era, there are mission agencies, people on mission, thinking and talking differently. They're saying, no, Christ has always been here. How can we facilitate, how can we develop national leaders to realize what is already the case? That's where, as theological educators, we view our job stepping in and saying, all right, I was talking with you this morning. We want to avail ourselves. We want to avail to you what we've had availed to us, right? We want to make available the resources, the time, the lectures, the books, the articles, the databases we've been privy to. We want to take all this stuff and make it available to you. Because by virtue of the fact that I happen to be born in this country, right, I ended up getting a good theological education. So, in this new era, there is maybe a shift in focus. No longer from, we're here to bring you something, but we're here to help you realize what is already here. All right. Now, 2 examples of how this is done. 2 examples of agencies and groups who do theological education, but they, in the past, have had very distinct ways of going about doing this. All right. First off, this group, United World Mission, I was with until about 6 months ago. Our mission statement said, "God delighting, world surprising churches everywhere." It's a great vision. I like that. Delights God, surprises the world everywhere. Good. Its focus was beachheadian, if we can use that word. We're going to come and we're going to establish churches where there are no churches. We're going to come, we're going to sometimes bring a team of people, and we're going to set up sort of a group, an outpost in enemy territory, and we're going to be converting you. We're going to use a very Western model perhaps to do it. Yes, we'll bring a couple nationals onto our team, and we'll nod towards cultural sensitivity and all this stuff. But at the end of the day, we're going to replicate, in broad strokes, what we've done up here in the north that worked, right? A lot of agencies have done this, not calling any names. A lot of them have done this, and with mixed results. Another option is something like Latin American Mission, a group that has a massive presence, particularly in Latin America, obviously. They don't do a lot of work in Africa. And LAM had a partner-based model now. And again, this distinction is heuristic. I'm not making a hard and fast rule. But on a partner-based model, what are the benefits of this? Or what does it look like? You, a fielded professor of theology, would go to a faculty, join the faculty, and the dean of that faculty becomes your boss. The faculty becomes your team. You answer to the hierarchy within your institution. You report, and you raise money, and you deal with pedestrian matters through your agency, but you are now partnered with and under the authority of a national. You're not part of a team that's simply in country doing their own thing, sometimes with the agreement of the national, sometimes not. So both models have significant strengths, and actually, full disclosure, about a year and a half ago, LAM approached UWM and said, can you absorb us? And so our agency, United World Mission, last year, January 1, tripled in size. All of LAM missionaries became United World missionaries. But the number one complaint and worry from the LAM missionaries was, are we going to change the way we do missions? Are we going to have to abandon a partner-based model? No, no. To the credit of our board and our president and a lot of the people in positions of decision said, no. In fact, at UWM, we need to reevaluate based on the reality of the world we live in, not the one we lived in, but the one we live in. We need to reevaluate what is the strategic way to go forward. So we need to change our mission statement. See God change lives and transform communities everywhere by partnering to equip churches, to equip leaders. That's the team side. Well, that's the partnering side. Establishing churches, the team side. And engaging in holistic mission. We're not here to simply hand you a tract and leave. We're here to engage in the needs of the community in a real, tangible way. Now, I think that's healthy. I think that's a good way to go forward. But still, the danger is we're up here in the north pontificating on mission strategy, partner team, which is most effective, theological education initiative. What do educators, what do theologians in Latin America say? I speak for Latin America today. What do theologians in Latin America say, right? They don't necessarily like to call this era the indigenous initiated missions because, well, again, they have problems with the term indigenous, but they're quick to point out, we're sending as many missionaries as you guys are sending to us. In fact, when I was in Argentina, my closest friend, missionary friend, was a missionary from Colombia named Edison. He was a mission to Argentina. So Colombian to Argentina, and his mission agency was called Mission Argentina, created. So Edison and his wife and 3 children had moved from Colombia, had immigrated, had attained citizenship in Argentina, and are going to spend their life in Argentina. So this is happening all over the world. So people are doing mission. We're not the only ones doing it. Obviously, you know this. Second era, it was called the facilitator era, right? We need to get out of the way and let nationals do what they do. And in theological education, this is very important because no matter how good my Spanish ever got, drinking mate while I lectured would still bother me. But it might not bother an Argentine. And that's trivial, but it's not. I'll never be as good at Argentine theology as an Argentine could be. Now, the word that several theologians in Latin America prefer to use is something, and it's here as well. They like the word missionary specialist. This is a good way of thinking about the task, particularly for us as theological educators. Right? For several reasons. One, the world is smaller, and you can get places much easier than you could before. Travel is cheaper in the scheme of things. Also, we have this thing called the internet. This is fantastic, right? So, a pastor who is on a farm north of Cartagena in Colombia can join a master's cohort that begins in the fall of 2015, and he has at Columbia. It's pretty exciting. And every semester, come to the city, spend a week, stay in a dorm, have a week full of 12-hour-a-day intensive courses, and then go back and continue working on his master's degree with weekly interaction with his professors via the internet. And in 3.5 years, he graduates with an accredited master's degree from FUSPC in Colombia. The world is smaller. He can do this. He can't leave his home because if he does, someone else will step into his position as pastor and take it. He can't leave his home because he doesn't have the money to do that. He can't move his family to Medellin and live in the dangerous city. And he doesn't want to. Culturally, that's not something he wants to do. So, thinking in this way, a lot of benefits. Also, another reality of the world is that, I'll put these up here. The reality is the world, the Western model that we have been trying to do in a lot of places, even seminaries in Latin America, is simply not working. A lot of seminaries have big institutions, have buildings. Some of them have libraries. And their tuition numbers are declining rapidly. It's abysmal how few students, like you saw in my class. ISEDET, during the 70s and 80s, was the place you wanted to go study theology in Latin America if you were a moderate evangelical Protestant in Latin America. You wanted to go to ISEDET. That was my hermeneutics class with 5 students. The numbers are to the floor. It's terrible. No one's going. The churches don't value theological education like we do here in the same way that we do here. So the job is real. The task is build the value of this in the eyes of the people sitting in the pews and in the pastors that are preaching. So the Western model is not necessarily working. And I'll share with you a real struggle of mine, and that is I don't like virtual education. I don't think it works. This, and I'm biased, this is how I was formed in community. And I think that is an optimal way to learn. Sitting in the commons area, discussing ideas. Went to St. Andrews. All the post-grad Divinity students, we were in one building. We shared rooms together. Our studies were literally shoulder to shoulder. We had to be in community. I like that. That's what I know, right? And it's, to me, it is optimal. But convention doesn't necessarily equal correct, okay? We have to meet them where they are in the world we are living in, not the one we wish we were in. And the pastors can't get from the campo to the cities to the big seminaries that we've built. So we have to figure out ways to move forward. Now, I'll be honest with you. Our faculty, we have heated debates about this. Purely virtual program, purely on-campus program, or a blended program. Right now, our master's program is a blended program. And we're going to move forward in that direction. But there are people on all 3 of these positions who vehemently stand up for their positions and their ideas. And the struggle is real because you know what? It's easy for a student in a master's program online not to log on and not to do their work. So it's a problem. How do you create buy-in for these students, right? Do you make the tuition the buy-in? How do you manage a cohort? How do you get professors who are notoriously bad at doing anything except their one specialty? How do you get them to run a virtual platform? How do you keep them from bringing the whole system crashing down, which I've done? Our program in Colombia, yeah. Click, whoops. All of a sudden I got 35 emails from the entire administrative team. What have you done? I'm so sorry. So, that happens. You need this, again, you don't think about this, but now you need an IT team that you have to pay. And then all of a sudden, all the other seminaries see that this guy, Johan is the guy we have, Johan does it well, they start headhunting him. And he has to turn down offers that pay better because he wants to stay at our seminary. These are real things that if you go into this world, you need to think about. As we're thinking about, we're realizing, man, we don't know what we're doing down here. You know this guy? One of the founding members of the Latin American Theological Society, right? Or Fundación Teológica Latina, René Paisha. He said, we need missionary specialists. Stop planting your churches here. We would like you to come teach us. Don't have to go all the way there with him, but he is has been a strong, and still is a strong voice in the evangelical world in Latin America. Milton Acosta, right? He is a friend of mine and a faculty member at FUSPC, and he wrote an article for Christianity Today in which he said, bad theology hurts people. He's right. We need missionary specialists. We need theologians, New Testament, Old Testament scholars, church historians, people who will come to a job that won't pay you anything and do something that no one maybe will even ever know that you did. Because without that, the shape of the church, the theological health and tenor of the church, and the conversation and the dialogue that will be going on in 20, 30, 40 years will suffer. It will be affected by us not deciding to go. Paul says this, the body is one, has many members, and all the members of the body, though many, are one body. So it is with Christ. For in the one Spirit we're all baptized into one body, Jews or Greeks, slaves or free. We're all made to drink of one Spirit. Indeed, the body does not consist of one member, but of many. We don't just church plant. We don't just do, ONG development, right? NGO development. We don't just get clean water. We need theologians. A lot of people I've talked to as I raise money and as I've gone through this process are like, you're a missionary. So what do you like church plant? Or no, I go teach theology. But what else do you do? That's not all you do. We need to maybe get into a new way of thinking about this. That as a mission specialist, a New Testament, Old Testament theologian can go and take their skill set, their ability, and do something in a part of the world where no one wants to go do it, but it drastically needs it. All right. This is our faculty at FUSPC. I do own more than one tie, I promise. Five of this group are fielded agents with United World Mission or LAM, now which is UWM/LAM. So a lot of people say, well, won't the Westerners, won't the national seminaries and faculty and board, won't they be resistant to Westerners coming in and helping? No, not at all. When you come in a position of humility and a position of saying, look, by virtue of the womb I came from, I'm from the North. I had no choice in that. But I was fortunate and blessed to get X education. I've had these resources. Can I share them with you? I'm here to help you do that. And I'm here to help you figure out how we can do this together so it's sustainable, so that you're not dependent on me. You'll grow a generation of theologians and scholars that will then fill the pulpits and the seminaries in our place. Now, I want to finish with this. We talked about convention or correctness. Does anyone recognize this photo? Taken in 1972 from the Apollo 17 mission. It's called the Blue Marble. It's a beautiful picture. What's wrong with it? Anybody know? This photo's been doctored. This is not how it was taken. This is how it was taken. Yeah. It was taken upside down. But what's upside down? When you're in space, north and south, these are frivolous. These don't really matter. They're matters of convention. They're not necessarily correct or right. Now, most maps were created where? In the north. Man, I'm feeling good today. I'm feeling really up. Oh man, I'm really down today. Which way is south? Down. We don't think about it, but perhaps somewhere deep in our psyche as people, we've started to perhaps equate, no pun intended, equate the South as lesser, the global South as lesser, the North as better, superior, advanced. I'm not going to go into that. But this is a series of kinds of maps called South Up maps. And Dr. Bray, I remember during your church history classes, you always walked around with your maps. You never used them. I don't remember you ever using it once in my class, but I do remember you had them. You had them. But look at this map. All the countries are printed right side up. Maybe we should change the way we look at the world. And maybe, like the guy asked me the question, what color are the people you're going to teach? Maybe we should reassess our conventions, the way we think about the world. Maybe changing the way we look at it fundamentally will help us. Realizing that, man, this is where the growth is. This is where the growth is. That's where the growth is. I want to be where God is growing the church. Andrew Walsh said, neither in theological education nor in theological scholarship will it be sufficient any longer to muddle through, to be just good enough. What is demanded is the highest quality in the service of the whole church throughout the world. As a theological educator, how are you going to impact the world? Not the world that you want to live in, but the world that we actually live in. Thanks for your time. May God bless you as He leads you toward where He would have you serve in this world. Thanks.